I thought the sound of crumpling metal was the loudest thing I would hear that day. I was wrong. The truly deafening moment came later. Lying broken on a hospital gurney, when I begged my mother to come for my newborn. She didn't cry. She just told me it wasn't her responsibility and hung up. That silence hurt worse than my fractured ribs, because I knew right then that the accident wasn't the only thing trying to destroy me. The first month of motherhood felt less like a new chapter and more like underwater exploration without a tank. I was 33 years old, educated, and generally considered a competent adult. Yet I found myself weeping over the specific shade of yellow in a dirty diaper at 3 a.m. My daughter, barely 7 pounds of fierce lungs and gripping fingers, had dismantled my schedule and rebuilt it around her hunger. I loved her with a terrifying intensity. It was a physical ache in the center of my chest, a constant awareness of her location and breathing pattern, but the love was wrapped in layers of exhaustion so thick I felt like I was moving through gelatin. My mother, Marlene, told me this was all normal, but she said it with the tone one uses for a toddler who dropped an ice cream cone. "You are too sensitive." "Stella," she had said 2 days ago, standing in my living room while I struggled to get the nursing pillow positioned correctly. She was dressed for a lunch date, wearing a cream silk blouse that looked dangerous near a newborn. She held her phone up, snapping 3 quick photos of the baby sleeping in the bassinet, but she made no move to pick her up when the whimpering started. "You will spoil her if you pick her up every time she makes a sound," Marlene advised, checking the lighting on her screen. "I just posted this. Look at the likes coming in already. Everyone is so happy for us. For us." I adjusted the pillow, wincing as my stitches pulled. I was still bleeding, still wearing mesh underwear, still trembling from the hormonal crash that happens 5 days postpartum. I did not want advice on social media engagement. I wanted someone to hold the baby for 20 minutes so I could take a shower without hallucinating phantom cries. "I am not spoiling her." "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "She is 5 days old. She needs to know I am here." Marlene sighed. The sound of a martyr dealing with an amateur. "Well, do it your way. But do not come crying to me when she is 18 months old and clinging to your leg because you never taught her independence." She left 10 minutes later, leaving a faint scent of expensive gardenia perfume and a lingering sense that I was already failing. The only person who made the air easier to breathe was my grandfather. Everett Hale was 78 years old, a man built of oak and silence. He did not own a smartphone. He did not offer advice on sleep training. He simply showed up. He arrived the afternoon after Marlene's visit, carrying 2 large paper bags. He knocked once, waited, and when I opened the door looking like a ghost with unwashed hair, he did not comment on my appearance. "I brought stew," he said, his voice gravelly and low. "And bread, and those oatmeal cookies you used to steal from the jar." He walked past me, placed the groceries on the counter, and began unpacking them with slow, deliberate movements. He put the perishables in the fridge and the cookies in the jar. Then he washed his hands at the sink, drying them thoroughly on a dish towel before turning to me. "Go sit down." "Stella," he said. I tried to argue. "I should make you tea." "You should sit," he corrected gently. He sat in the armchair across from the sofa while I nursed the baby. He did not stare, and he did not check a watch. He just sat there, a steady anchor in the room. When the baby finished and fell into a milk-drunk stupor, he extended his arms. "I will take the watch," he said. "You close your eyes." I handed her over. Everett held her differently than Marlene did. Marlene held the baby like a prop. Everett held her like she was rare glass. His large, weathered hands supported her head and back with absolute security. I slept for 2 hours on the sofa. When I woke up, he was still there, looking out the window at the gray afternoon light, rocking slightly. He looked at me, his eyes sharp under his bushy white brows. "You are doing a good job," he said. I started to tear up. "I am tired. Grandpa, I feel like I do not know what I'm doing." He nodded. "That means you are paying attention. The ones who think they know everything are the ones you have to worry about." That conversation was replaying in my mind as I drove home from the pediatrician's office 3 days later. It was a Tuesday in Briar Glen, the sky a bruised purple color threatening rain. I had taken the baby for her 2-week checkup. The doctor had been kind, assuring me that her weight gain was perfect, that her reflexes were strong, and that I was, in fact, capable of keeping a human being alive. I felt lighter. I adjusted the rearview mirror to catch a glimpse of the car seat base in the back. I could not see her face, but the mirror I had attached to the headrest showed me the top of her knit hat. She was asleep. I was driving 10 miles under the speed limit. I was the safest driver on the road. I signaled early. I checked my blind spots twice. I was a mother protecting her cub. I was stopped at the intersection of Main and Elm, waiting for the light to turn green. I remember looking at the clock on the dashboard. It was 2:14 in the afternoon. I remember thinking I could get home, feed her, and maybe start a load of laundry before Graham got home from work. The light turned green. I eased my foot onto the gas. The world ended in a roar of tearing metal. It did not happen in slow motion. It happened all at once. A massive force slammed into the driver's side of my sedan. A battering ram of steel and velocity. The sound was not just a crash. It was an explosion of glass and crunching iron that vibrated in my teeth. My car was thrown sideways. The horizon spun. Pavement, sky, pavement, dashboard. The airbag detonated in my face like a punch from a heavyweight boxer, blinding me with white dust and searing heat. Then, stillness. The silence that followed was heavy and ringing. I was suspended in a belt that dug violently into my chest. My mouth tasted like copper and chemicals. Baby. The thought cut through the gray fog in my brain. I tried to turn my head, but my neck screamed in protest. A jagged line of pain shot down my left arm. I tried to inhale, but my ribs felt like a cage of broken sticks. Baby. I let out a sound that was half gasp, half scream. Is she okay? I could not hear her. That was the worst thing. I could hear the hissing of the radiator, the distant shouting of voices outside, the thrum of blood in my ears, but I could not hear the baby. Please, I whispered, the word bubbling up through something wet in my throat. Please. Suddenly, the passenger door was wrenched open. A face appeared, a woman with wide, terrified eyes. "Oh my God," she said. "Someone call 911. My baby." I choked out, "Check the back." The woman looked confused. Then her eyes darted to the back seat. She leaned in, reaching toward the car seat. "Is she crying?" I demanded, though my voice was a broken rasp. "Why isn't she crying?" She is opening her eyes," the woman said, her voice trembling. "She looks okay. She is moving her arms." The relief hit me so hard I almost passed out. She was alive. She was moving. I heard the sirens then, a wailing chorus getting louder. The next 20 minutes were a blur of organized chaos. Firefighters cutting the door, a paramedic leaning over me, stabilizing my neck with a rigid collar. "Ma'am, my name is David," the paramedic said, his face close to mine. "I need you to stay with me. Can you tell me your name?" "Stella," I said, "my daughter, the baby in the back. We have got her. Stella. My partner is with her right now. She is secure in the seat. The seat did its job. We are going to take care of both of you." I saw them lift the carrier out of the car. I craned my neck, fighting against the collar, just to see the curve of the plastic shell. It looked intact. "She's okay," David promised me. "She is going in the ambulance with us." They loaded me onto a stretcher. The movement sent a bolt of agony through my hip that made my vision tunnel. I gritted my teeth, focusing on the ceiling of the ambulance. "We are taking you to Briar Glen Medical Center," David said as he started an IV line in my hand. "Your vitals are stable, but you have taken a big hit. We need to check for internal injuries. Is she here?" I asked, my eyes darting around the small space. "She is right here," a female voice said from the front. "She is strapped in. She is crying a little now, sweetie, which is a good sign. It means her lungs are working. Let her cry." I thought, Let her scream. As long as she is alive. The hospital was a sensory assault of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. I was wheeled into a trauma bay, and the baby was whisked away to pediatrics for a full evaluation. I tried to grab the nurse's scrub top. "Do not lose her," I begged. "We won't," the nurse said, peeling my fingers away gently. "We are just checking her out. Doctor Evans is with her for the next hour." I was a pincushion, X-rays, CT scans, blood draws. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a deep, throbbing ache that seemed to live in my marrow. Finally, a doctor with graying temples and a kind face stood over me. "Stella, I am Dr. Aris. Here is the situation. You have a fractured pelvis, 3 broken ribs, and a concussion. You also have a laceration on your spleen that we need to monitor closely. If the bleeding doesn't stop on its own, we will need to go in surgically." I tried to process the list. Fractured pelvis. That meant I couldn't walk. "My baby?" I said. "She is perfectly fine, Doctor," Aris said. And I saw a genuine smile break through his professional mask. "Not a scratch. Those car seats are miracles of engineering. We are keeping her for observation just to be safe, but she is medically cleared. Thank God." I closed my eyes, letting the tears finally leak out. "However, Doctor," Aris continued, his voice shifting, "you are going to be admitted. You have surgery scheduled for your hip in the morning to place some pins. You are looking at a recovery time of several weeks before you are mobile, and you are going to be on strong pain medication." He paused. "You cannot care for a newborn right now. Stella, you can barely lift your head. We need to release the baby to a family member or a designated caregiver until you are stable." I nodded weakly. I understood. I could not even sit up. I certainly could not change a diaper or pace the floor with a colicky infant. "I need to call my husband." I said, "Graham, we tried the number listed in your phone." The nurse said, "It went to voicemail. We left a message. He is at work." I murmured, "He works in a secure building. He can't always answer." "Okay," the nurse said. "Is there anyone else? We need to get a care plan in place before the shift change. The social worker is on her way down." "My mother," I said. "Call my mother. Marlene Morgan." It was the obvious choice. It was the only choice. Marlene was difficult. Yes. She was critical. Yes. But this was a crisis. This was her daughter broken in a hospital bed and her granddaughter needing safety. In my mind, the petty grievances of the last week evaporated. This was what family did. They showed up when the car was crushed. The social worker, a woman named Mrs. Gable with kind eyes and a clipboard, came in 10 minutes later. "I have Mrs. Morgan on the line," she said, holding up a sleek black office phone. "I put it on speaker so you can hear." "Mom?" I said. The word came out as a croak. "Stella?" Marlene's voice filled the small trauma bay. It was sharp, high-pitched. "Oh my God. I just heard. Are you alive?" "I'm okay. Mom, I'm hurt pretty bad. But I'm alive." "Oh, thank God." I was just about to sit down for dinner and the phone rang and I just knew something was wrong. You know I have that intuition. "Mom, listen." I cut in, fighting the fog of the pain medication they had just administered. "The baby is okay, but I can't take care of her. I have a broken pelvis. I need surgery." Graham isn't answering his phone. There was a pause on the line. "Well, what does that mean?" Marlene asked. "It means I need you to come get her." I said, "I need you to take her for a few days until Graham gets this sorted out. Or just come here and sit with her. They won't let me keep her in the trauma unit." Another pause. Longer this time. The silence stretched until the hum of the machine seemed deafening. "Stella, you know I can't do that," Marlene said. My brain stopped processing. I blinked at the ceiling tiles. "What?" "I have that gala tomorrow night," Marlene said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "The one for the library board. I am the chair. Stella, I can't just have a newborn dropped in my lap. I haven't slept through the night in 30 years. I looked at Mrs. Gable. Her face had gone perfectly still. "Mom," I said, my voice rising, "I am in the hospital. I have broken bones. I am not asking you to babysit so I can go to a movie. I am incapacitated. I know, honey. And it is terrible, really. But you have to understand my boundaries. I told you this. I told you I'm not the nanny. This is your responsibility. You chose to have this child. I stared at the phone. The cruelty was so casual, so matter of fact, that it felt like a hallucination. She is your granddaughter, I whispered. She is 2 weeks old. And she has a father, doesn't she? Marlene snapped. Where is Graham? Why is this falling on me? It is always the mother's mother who gets burdened. Let the father's side handle it. Graham's parents are in Florida. Mom, you know that. You are 20 minutes away. I can't do it. Stella, I am sorry, but I just can't. I am not set up for a baby. My house is not baby-proofed. It is just too much stress on me right now. I have high blood pressure. You know, Mrs. Gable stepped forward, her voice professional but icy. Mrs. Morgan, this is the hospital social worker. We are looking for a temporary discharge plan. If you are unable to come, the baby will have to remain in the nursery or be placed in emergency foster care until the father is located. Foster care? Marlene let out a scoff. Well, that is a bit dramatic, isn't it? I am sure Graham will pick up his phone eventually. Just wait for him. I can't believe you. I said, the tears starting again, hot and angry. I am lying here bleeding, and you are worried about a library gala? Don't you guilt-trip me. Stella Morgan, I have done everything for you. I bought you that stroller. I hosted your shower. I am setting a boundary for my own mental health. You will figure it out. You always do. The line clicked. Then the drone of the dial tone filled the room. Mrs. Gable lowered the phone slowly. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw pity in her eyes. It was a terrible look. It made me feel smaller than the accident had. I am so sorry, Mrs. Gable said softly. I turned my head away, staring at the wall. The physical pain was a dull roar, but the hole in my chest where my mother used to be was ragged and gaping. She had not just said no. She had framed her abandonment as a virtue. She had called it a boundary. I lay there for 20 minutes, listening to the beep of the heart monitor. I felt entirely alone in the universe. Graham was unreachable. My mother was a wall of ice. My body was broken. Then the door to the trauma bay slid open. I flinched, expecting another doctor with bad news. It was Everett. He looked older than I had ever seen him. His face was pale, his skin looking like parchment paper. He was wearing his gardening jacket, stained at the elbows, and he was clutching his hat in his hands. He saw me, and his shoulders dropped 3 inches. Stella, he breathed. Grandpa. I tried to reach for him, but the IV line tugged. He was at my side in 2 strides. He took my hand, the one without the needles, and held it in both of his. His hands were shaking, just a little. I saw the car, he said, his voice thick. I drove past the intersection. I saw the car. Stella, I thought. I squeezed his hand as hard as I could. I'm okay. I'm broken, but I'm okay. He took a deep breath, composing himself. He straightened his spine, putting the fear away in a box somewhere deep inside him. He looked at the machines, the bandages, the cast on my leg. And the little one? He asked. She's fine, not a scratch. He nodded, closing his eyes for a second. Good, good. Then he opened his eyes, and they were hard, flinty. I called your mother. He said, I looked down at the sheets. She won't come. Grandpa, she said it's not her responsibility. Everett went very still. He did not yell. He did not curse, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. She told me, he said quietly. She told me she was teaching you a lesson about independence. I let out a sob. I can't take care of the baby. Grandpa, they won't let me. I need someone to sign for her. I need someone to hold her. Everett released my hand and turned to Mrs. Gable, who was standing quietly in the corner. Ma'am, he said, I am Everett Hale. I am Stella's grandfather. I want to see my great-granddaughter. and I want the paperwork to discharge her into my custody until the father arrives. Mrs. Gable hesitated. Mr. Hale? Generally, we release to parents or, I am her family, Everett said. His voice was not loud, but it had the weight of a sledgehammer. I am here, I am capable, and I am not leaving this building without ensuring that child is safe. Mrs. Gable looked at him, then at me. I nodded frantically. He is the one, I rasped. He is the one I trust. I will go check on the protocols. Mrs. Gable said, Let me speak to the administrator. She left the room. Everett turned back to me. He brushed a stray hair off my forehead. Rest, Stella. I have her. I will sit right outside the nursery door if I have to. No one is taking her anywhere. Thank you, I whispered, the exhaustion finally pulling me under. Everett patted my hand one last time. Then he walked to the door. He paused in the doorway, looking back at me, then at the empty hallway. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a flip phone that looked like it belonged in a museum. He stepped into the corridor, but I could still see him through the glass. He dialed a number from memory. He put the phone to his ear and waited. When he spoke, his voice carried through the open door, low and dangerous. Jonah, he said, it is Everett. He listened for a second. His jaw set like stone. It is happening now, he said. Marlene crossed the line. I need you to protect my granddaughter today. He snapped the phone shut and stood guard at my door, a sentinel in a gardening jacket, while I finally let the darkness take me. Waking up after surgery was not like waking up from sleep. It was like being dredged up from the bottom of a deep, dark lake. The surface broke slowly. First came the sound, the rhythmic, mechanical beep of the monitor, the hush of air conditioning, the squeak of rubber shoes on linoleum. Then came the smell, that sharp, antiseptic scent that lives in the back of your throat for days. Finally, the pain arrived. It was not a sharp stab anymore, but a heavy, throbbing weight in my hips, as if my bones had been replaced with lead pipes. I blinked, my eyelids feeling like sandpaper. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of the medical equipment and a sliver of hallway light cutting across the floor. I turned my head to the left, a movement that took an embarrassing amount of effort. There was a vinyl chair in the corner. It was empty. For a long, confused moment, my brain refused to accept the data. I stared at the empty chair, waiting for a shape to resolve itself, waiting for the familiar silhouette of my mother, Marlene. I expected her to be there, perhaps reading a magazine, perhaps scrolling on her phone, perhaps looking annoyed that I had inconvenienced her schedule, but I expected her to be there, because that is what mothers do. When your car is crushed and your body is broken, your mother sits in the chair. It is a universal law, like gravity, but the chair was empty. The memory of the phone call in the trauma bay came rushing back, crashing into my consciousness with the violence of the accident itself. I have that gala tomorrow night. It is not my responsibility. Let the father's side handle it. She had not come. I let out a sound, a dry, cracking sob that hurt my ribs. The humiliation was sudden and absolute. I was 33 years old, a mother myself, and I lay there weeping not just from the pain in my shattered pelvis, but from the realization that I was not worth a missed library board meeting. A shadow moved in the doorway. It was not Marlene, it was Everett. He stepped into the room quietly, moving with the careful grace of a man who knows that hospitals are places of reverence and fear. He looked exhausted. His white hair was mussed, and he was still wearing the same flannel shirt from yesterday, though it was now rumpled and buttoned wrong at the collar. He saw I was awake and pulled the visitor chair closer to the bed, the metal legs scraping softly against the floor. "You are back with us," he said gently. I tried to clear my throat. My mouth felt like it was stuffed with cotton. Water. He poured a plastic cup from a pitcher on the tray table and held the straw to my lips. The water was lukewarm, but it tasted like nectar. I drank greedily until he pulled it away. "Slow down," he said. "You will make yourself sick." I fell back against the pillows, breathing hard. The fog of anesthesia was lifting, leaving behind a sharp, jagged clarity. She didn't come. I whispered. Everett did not pretend to misunderstand. He did not offer platitudes or excuses. He simply shook his head. No. Stella? She did not. Is she still at home? Everett's jaw tightened. I called her again. 3 hours ago. I told her you were out of surgery. I told her the extent of the injuries. And she asked if I had the insurance card. He said, his voice flat. She said she was busy coordinating things from her end. Coordinating things. The phrase hung in the air, meaningless and cold. Where is the baby? I asked, panic flaring in my chest again. Everett placed a hand on my arm. His skin was rough, calloused from decades of working with wood and soil. She is safe. Stella. She is in the nursery down the hall. I have seen her with my own eyes 10 minutes ago. She is sleeping. She took 2 ounces of formula. She is warm. She is safe. Who is watching her? I asked. Who is signing for her? I am listed as the emergency contact for now. Everett said. The social worker. Mrs. Gable. She is a good woman. She put a hold on the discharge. No one takes that baby out of this building without a signature from me or you. I made sure of it. I closed my eyes, the relief washing over me. Thank you, Grandpa. There was a light knock on the door, and a nurse bustled in. She was young, with her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail and a stethoscope around her neck. She checked the monitors and adjusted the drip on my IV. Good to see you awake. Mrs. Morgan? She said brightly. Doctor, Eris will be by later to check the incision sites. Your vitals are looking stable. She paused, looking at her clipboard, then at Everett, then back to me. A slight frown creased her forehead. We did have a question about the visitor list. She said, What about it? I asked. Well, we had a call earlier at the nurses' station in the pediatric unit. A woman, she didn't give her name at first, but she was asking very specific questions about the discharge protocols. She wanted to know if the baby could be released to a designated family representative if the mother was incapacitated. My stomach twisted. Did she say who she was? She eventually said she was handling the family's affairs. The nurse said, she sounded very authoritative. She knew your date of birth and your insurance provider. We assumed it was your mother. But when we checked the file, Mrs. Gable had made a note that the grandmother declined to come, so we were confused. Everett sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing. What did you tell her? Everett asked. We told her that due to the accident and the legal liability, we release only to the parents or the person physically present with the emergency power of attorney. She got quite upset. She asked if you, Mrs. Morgan, were lucid enough to sign documents. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why would Marlene call the hospital to ask if I was lucid, but refuse to come see me? Why would she ask about discharge rules if she had refused to take the baby? Did she leave a number? I asked. No, the nurse said. She called from a blocked number. We just wanted to let you know, if she calls again. Do you want us to put her through? No. Everett said before I could speak. If she wants to talk to Stella, she can walk through the front door like a human being. The nurse nodded, sensing the tension. Understood. I will put a note in the chart. No phone transfers. She left the room, leaving a silence that felt heavy and charged. That does not make sense, I said, looking at Everett. Why would she ask about taking the baby if she told me she wouldn't do it? She said it was too much stress. She said she had a gala. Everett looked at the floor, his expression unreadable. People do strange things when they are losing control. Stella, or when they are trying to gain it. Before we could dissect it further, the door banged open. Graham rushed in. He looked like he had run all the way from his office. His tie was undone, his shirt was wrinkled, and his face was pale and slick with sweat. He was carrying his laptop bag and a crumpled jacket. Stella. He dropped his bags on the floor and practically fell onto the side of the bed, grabbing my hand. His palms were clammy. Oh my God. Stella, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Graham. I breathed, the tears coming back. You're here. I was in a meeting, he stammered, his eyes scanning my bandages, the IVs, the cast, a secure meeting, no phones allowed. I came out and I had 14 missed calls. I drove like a maniac. Is she okay? Is the baby okay? She is fine, I said, squeezing his hand. She is in the nursery. Graham put his head down on the mattress. Near my shoulder, I could feel him shaking. He was a good man. Graham. He was gentle, kind, and he loved our daughter, but he was soft. He avoided conflict the way a cat avoids water. He wanted everyone to be happy, which usually meant he ended up making no one happy. I called your mom, he said into the sheets. As soon as I got the messages, I called Marlene. I stiffened. What did she say? She told me not to panic. Graham said, lifting his head. He looked confused. She said you were in surgery and that I shouldn't come to the hospital yet. What? Everett's voice was sharp from the corner. She said the hospital was on lockdown or something? Graham rubbed his eyes. She sent me a text. She said, Graham, stay put. The doctors are working. If you go down there now, you will just be in the way. I am handling the communication with the staff. I will tell you when to go. I stared at him. Marlene had told the hospital she wasn't coming. She had told me she wasn't coming. But she had told Graham that she was handling it? Show me. Everett commanded. Graham fished his phone out of his pocket and unlocked it. He handed it to Everett. Everett scrolled through the messages, his face darkening with every swipe. Listen to this, Everett said, reading aloud. Do not sign anything if the hospital asks. They are trying to cover their tracks because of the insurance liability. Wait until I get there to review the forms. Graham looked at me helpless. I didn't know what to do. Stella. She sounded like she knew what was happening. She said she had a lawyer friend looking into the accident fault. I thought she was helping. She is not helping. Graham, I said, my voice trembling with anger. She isn't even here. She refused to come. Graham blinked. What do you mean? She refused. I said, I called her from the trauma bay. I asked her to take the baby. She said no. She said she had a library gala. Graham's mouth fell open. He looked from me to Everett, trying to reconcile the helpful, authoritative texts on his phone with the reality of the empty chair, but she texted me 20 minutes ago. She asked for your social security number. She said she needed it to upgrade your room to a private suite. Did you give it to her? Everett asked, his voice low and urgent. Graham hesitated. I thought she was helping. I sent it. Everett closed his eyes and exhaled a long, slow breath through his nose. Graham, Everett said, opening his eyes, you need to stop texting her, right now. The door opened again. This time, it was not a nurse. A man in a sharp charcoal suit stepped in. He was in his 40s, with wire-rimmed glasses and an air of calm precision that made him stand out in the sterile hospital room. He carried a leather briefcase. Jonah, Everett said, standing up. Jonah Crest nodded to Everett, then turned his gaze to me. Stella, he said, I am sorry we are meeting under these circumstances. Who is this? Graham asked, looking threatened. This is my attorney, Everett said. I asked him to come. Attorney? Graham looked panicked. Do we need an attorney? Was the other driver drunk? We are not here for the other driver. Graham, Everett said, we are here for Marlene. Jonah set his briefcase on the tray table. He did not waste time with small talk. He looked at me with eyes that were kind, but incredibly intense. Stella, he began, his voice smooth and clear. I need to ask you some questions. I know you are in pain, and I know you are medicated. But I need you to focus. I nodded, feeling a cold knot of dread forming in my stomach. Okay. Has your mother, at any point in the last week, asked you to sign any documents? Jonah asked. I frowned, thinking back through the haze of newborn sleeplessness. Documents? No. I mean, we signed the birth certificate at the hospital when the baby was born. Think carefully. Jonah pressed. Not at the hospital. At home. Did she bring anything over? Did she ask for a signature for a bank account, an insurance policy, a package delivery? Anything. I closed my eyes, trying to replay the last few days. The days and nights had bled together into a gray loop of feeding, burping, and changing. Marlene had come over a few times. She had brought casseroles. She had complained about the messy kitchen. Wait, I said. The memory flickered. It was Tuesday morning, 2 days before the accident. I was on the sofa, nursing the baby. I hadn't slept in 24 hours. Marlene had come in with a folder. She said something about insurance. I murmured. Tell me exactly what she said, Jonah said, leaning in. She said that since I was a new mom, I needed to update my beneficiaries, I said, the memory sharpening. She said she was going to the bank anyway and could drop it off for me. She said it was just standard stuff. Just in case something happens, she said. Did you read it? Jonah asked. I shook my head, shame heating my cheeks. The baby was crying. I was so tired. I just wanted her to stop talking. She had the papers clipped together. She just flipped up the bottom corner and pointed to the line. She said, "Sign here, and I will handle the rest." Graham let out a groan and put his head in his hands. Jonah looked at Everett. They exchanged a look that communicated volumes. I signed it. I whispered, "What did I sign?" Jonah opened his briefcase and pulled out a thin file. "I have a friend in the records department of the county clerk's office," Jonah said, "and another contact here in hospital administration. When Everett called me, I asked them to flag any recent filings under your name." He pulled out a single sheet of paper and held it up. It was a photocopy. "This was filed electronically at 8:30 this morning," Jonah said. I looked at the timestamp, 8:30. That was 10 minutes after the accident. 10 minutes after I was loaded into the ambulance. "What is it?" I asked. "It is a durable power of attorney for healthcare and asset management," Jonah said. "It grants Marlene Morgan full authority to make medical decisions for you if you are incapacitated, and full access to your financial accounts to manage expenses on your behalf." I felt the blood drain from my face. "But I have Graham," I said. "Graham is my partner. He is the father. You are not married," Jonah pointed out gently. "Without a marriage license, the next of kin hierarchy can be flexible if there is a document like this in play, and this document specifically names her as the primary agent, overriding any other implied guardians." "She knew," I whispered. "She knew I was in an accident, and the first thing she did was file the paper." "It looks that way," Jonah said. "She likely had the document signed and ready, waiting for a reason to use it. The accident gave her the trigger. She filed it immediately. That is why she called the nurses' station asking if you were lucid. She needed to know if her authority could be challenged yet." "But why?" Graham asked, looking up. "Why would she do this? She is her mother." Everett spoke then, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Because control is the only currency she understands." "Graham." Everett walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot. "She refused to take the baby." Everett said, "Think about it. If she takes the baby as a grandmother, she is just helping. She is a babysitter. But if she refuses, and claims Stella is unfit because of the injuries, and claims you, Graham, are absent or overwhelmed, then she steps in with this piece of paper. She becomes the legal guardian," Jonah finished. "Not out of love, out of necessity. She creates a vacuum of care, and then she fills it with legal authority." I felt sick, physically sick. My mother had left me alone in a trauma center, terrified and broken, so that she could maneuver herself into a position of ownership over my life and my child. She refused to come. I said, the realization hitting me like a second car crash. She refused to come so that she could say there was no one else. Jonah nodded. "Exactly. She is building a case for temporary necessity. If she can prove you are incapacitated and Graham is unstable or unavailable, she uses the POA to take custody of the infant and control of your assets for your own good." Graham stood up, his face red. "That is insane. I am right here. I am the father. And she is texting you to stay away." Jonah noted. She is telling you to wait. She is trying to keep you off the board until she has the pieces in place. I tried to sit up, ignoring the screaming pain in my pelvis. I need to see her. I said, I need to see my baby. Stella, you can't get up, Graham said, reaching for me. I need to see her, I shouted, the panic clawing at my throat. I need to make sure she's really there. I need to hold her. Everett turned from the window. He looked at Jonah. Can we get a wheelchair? Everett asked. Jonah nodded. I will talk to the nurse. We will make it happen. 10 minutes later, I was being wheeled down the corridor. Graham pushed the chair, and Everett walked beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder. Jonah walked ahead, clearing the path. The pediatric unit was brighter than my floor. There were murals of zoo animals on the walls. We stopped in front of the large glass window of the nursery. There were 6 bassinets in the room. Which one? I asked, pressing my hand against the glass. Third from the left. Everett said. I looked. She was wrapped in a pink hospital blanket, wearing a tiny knit hat with a bow. She was so small, so incredibly still. As I watched, she stirred. Her little leg kicked out, fighting the swaddle. Her mouth opened in a yawn that took over her whole face. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. She was real. She was there. She wasn't a pawn in a legal filing. She wasn't a photo opportunity for Facebook. She was my daughter. Can I go in? I asked. The nurse at the station looked at our group. The lawyer, the grandfather, the distraught father, and the broken mother in the wheelchair. She nodded. Just for a minute, she said. Graham wheeled me in. The air smelled of baby powder and sanitizer. He parked me next to the bassinet. I reached out, my hands trembling. I touched her cheek. It was warm and impossibly soft. She turned her head toward my touch, her rooting reflex kicking in. I am here, I whispered to her. I am here, baby girl. I looked at Graham. Pick her up, please. I can't lift her. Graham reached down and scooped her up. He held her awkwardly but tightly, burying his nose in her neck. He was crying silently. Give her to me, I said. He lowered her into my arms. The weight of her on my chest was the best painkiller in the world. I smelled the top of her head, that sweet, earthy newborn smell. I looked down at her sleeping face. I thought about Marlene. I thought about the insurance forms. I thought about the empty chair in my room. Marlene had made a mistake. She thought that because I was soft-hearted, because I was exhausted, because I had always sought her approval, that I was weak. She thought she could maneuver around me like a piece of furniture. She didn't know what happened to a woman when she held her child after almost losing her. I felt something harden inside me. It was cold and heavy, like iron. I looked up at Jonah. He was watching me with that intense, analytical gaze. She is not taking her, I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded deeper, older. No, Jonah agreed. She isn't. I looked at Graham. Give me your phone. He handed it to me. I powered it off. We are done listening to her. I said, we are done waiting for her permission. I handed the phone back to Graham and looked at Jonah. What do we do? I asked. Jonah stepped closer, lowering his voice so the nurses wouldn't hear. We act fast, he said. If your mother is trying to establish control through paperwork, she may attempt custody through temporary necessity. She will argue that you are physically unable to care for the child and that Graham is not a suitable guardian. She will try to get an emergency order. He paused, looking at the baby in my arms. We stop that today, Jonah said. We file a countermotion. We revoke the POA immediately, and we document everything. Every text she sent Graham, every lie she told the hospital. Everett placed his hand on top of mine, covering the baby's tiny fist. She picked the wrong day to play games. Stella, he said. I looked down at my daughter one last time. I promised her silently, fiercely. Chaos will not touch you. I will burn the world down before I let her take you. I looked up at the 3 men standing around me. My army. Draw up the papers. Jonah, I said, let's go to war. The sound of Jonah Kress typing on his laptop was a rapid-fire staccato that seemed to keep time with the anxious rhythm of my own heart. He had set up a makeshift office on the rolling tray table at the foot of my hospital bed, his phone buzzing every 30 seconds with notifications. It was barely 10 o'clock in the morning, but the atmosphere in the room felt like late night in a war room. "We are filing in Caldwell County immediately," Jonah said without looking up, his fingers flying across the keys. "I am submitting an emergency protective motion. The goal here is clarity. We need a judge to put it on paper that your parental rights are intact, that your capacity to direct care is unaffected by your physical injuries, and that any temporary custody arrangement is voluntary on your part." He stopped typing and looked at me, his wire-rimmed glasses reflecting the fluorescent overhead lights. "This prevents the ambush, Stella. It means if anyone, specifically your mother, tries to claim you are unfit or that the baby is abandoned, there is already a court document saying otherwise. We are building a fortress before the enemy even shows up at the gate." I lay back against the stiff pillows, the pain in my pelvis a constant. Grinding noise in the background of my thoughts, I felt exhausted, but sleep was impossible. My mind was too busy cataloging the betrayals of the last 24 hours. "Make sure it says Graham is the father," I said, my voice raspy. "Make sure it says he is here and he is capable." Jonah nodded. "It is in there. We are establishing a chain of custody that loops only through people you trust. You, Graham, and Everett." Everett was standing by the door, speaking in low tones with Mrs. Gable, the social worker. They were reviewing a clipboard full of forms. I watched my grandfather's face. He looked gray, the deep lines around his mouth etched with a mixture of fatigue and sorrow. But his posture was unyielding. He was the wall between me and the world. Mrs. Gable walked over to my bedside. Her earlier pity had been replaced by professional determination. She seemed to sense that the dynamic had shifted, that I was no longer just a victim of a car accident, but a woman under siege. "Mrs. Morgan, I want to review the safety plan we have drafted," she said. "We are listing Mr. Weller and Mr. Hale as the authorized caregivers. This means that while you are recovering here, the baby can stay in the room with you as long as one of them is present to assist. If the baby is discharged before you are, she goes home with Graham, to your residence." "And if my mother shows up?" I asked. Mrs. Gable clicked her pen. "If Mrs. Morgan arrives, she is a visitor, nothing more. She has no authority to remove the infant from the nursery, no authority to view your medical records, and no authority to make decisions. If she insists otherwise, security will be called." I exhaled, a long, shaky breath. It felt like we were preparing for a hurricane. We were boarding up the windows and stacking sandbags. "Thank you," I said. "Just doing my job," Mrs. Gable said. "And honestly, I don't like being lied to. Your mother told me yesterday she was the only option. I don't appreciate being used as a lever to pry a baby away from her parents." She left the room to file the paperwork, and for a moment, the room was quiet. Graham was sitting in the chair next to me, holding my hand. He had not let go for the last hour. He looked shell-shocked, his eyes red-rimmed and unfocused. "I am sorry," he whispered for the 10th time. "I should have known. I shouldn't have texted her. It isn't your fault, Graham," I said, though a small, hard part of me wished he had been sharper. "She is good at this. She has had 30 years of practice on me. She knows exactly which buttons to push to make herself seem like the savior." The peace lasted for exactly 45 minutes. It was broken not by a shout, but by a presence. My phone, which was sitting on the nightstand, lit up with a text message. It was from Marlene. "I am in the lobby, bringing some things for the nurses. Be up in a minute." I stared at the screen, my stomach dropping to the floor. The audacity was breathtaking. Yesterday she couldn't be bothered to pick up her granddaughter because of a library gala. Today, she was in the lobby with gifts. "She is here," I said. Everett turned from the window. He didn't ask who. He just buttoned his flannel jacket. "Stay in the bed." "Stella," he said, "I will handle her." "No," I said. The word surprised even me. I pushed the button to raise the head of the bed, wincing as the movement jarred my fractured ribs. I need to see her, I said. I need to look her in the eye. If I hide in here, she wins. She gets to tell the story out there in the hallway. She gets to play the concerned grandmother while I am the invalid behind the door. Jonah looked at me, assessing. If you confront her, you must remain calm, he warned. She will try to provoke an emotional response. If you scream, if you cry, if you look hysterical, it feeds her narrative that you are postpartum and unstable. I won't scream. I said, get me the chair. Getting into the wheelchair was a production of agony. Graham had to lift me, his arms shaking with the effort to be gentle. While the nurse managed the IV pole and the catheter bag, I bit my lip until I tasted blood to keep from crying out. When I was finally seated, I felt dizzy and weak, but the anger burning in my chest was a powerful stimulant. We went out into the hallway. We didn't have to go far to find her. Marlene was at the main nurse's station, the center of attention. She looked immaculate. She was wearing a tailored navy blazer and white trousers that looked like they had never touched a dirty surface. Her hair was a perfect, coiffed helmet of blonde. She was holding a massive bouquet of lilies and hydrangeas, expensive, showy, and taking up the entire counter. I watched her from 10 feet away. She was leaning over the desk, smiling that dazzling benevolence of the rich smile she used on waiters and donors. I just wanted to thank you all for taking such good care of my girls, I heard her say. Her voice was smooth, melodic. I know Stella can be difficult. She has always been high-strung. I am sure she has been giving you an earful. The nurse behind the desk looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Morgan, we actually— Oh, don't worry. I know how she gets, Marlene interrupted, laughing lightly. Especially with the hormones. I am just here to take the load off. I have the paperwork all sorted out. I can take the baby whenever you are ready to release her. I have the car seat in my Range Rover. I gripped the armrests of my wheelchair so hard my knuckles turned white. Marlene, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter of the station. Marlene turned. Her smile didn't drop. It just froze, then reconfigured itself into a mask of exaggerated pity. Stella. She rushed forward, her heels clicking on the tile. Oh, look at you. Oh, my poor baby. Why are you out of bed? You look terrible. You are pale as a sheet. She reached out to touch my face. I jerked my head back. Don't, I said. Marlene pulled her hand back, looking wounded. She glanced around at the nurses, at the other visitors in the hallway, performing her hurt. I am just trying to comfort you, she said, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. I know you are upset. I know the accident was traumatic, but there is no need to be hostile in front of people. I am not hostile, I said, keeping my voice deadly level. I am confused. Yesterday, when I was bleeding in the trauma bay, you told me you couldn't come. You said it wasn't your responsibility. You said you had a gala. Marlene waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. Oh, Stella, don't be dramatic. I was in shock. You called me out of the blue, screaming and crying. I didn't know what was going on. I needed a moment to process. And frankly, I knew you needed to calm down before I could be of any help. You told me to let the father's side handle it. I said, you hung up on me. I was motivating you, Marlene said, her eyes widening with innocent conviction. You are a mother now. You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I couldn't just rush in and fix everything the second you snapped your fingers. That is enabling. She looked at Graham, who was standing behind my chair, his hands gripping the handles. And Graham, she said, offering him a tight, conspiratorial smile. I see you finally made it. I assume you are overwhelmed. It is a lot, isn't it? A new baby and a broken wife. She stepped closer, invading my personal space. Look, let's be practical, she said, lowering her voice to a reasonable, businesslike tone. You are in a wheelchair, Stella. You can't even use the bathroom by yourself. Graham has to work. You cannot take care of a newborn right now. It is physically impossible. I have a plan. I said, Graham is taking time off. Grandpa is helping. Grandpa? Marlene let out a short, sharp laugh. Your grandfather is nearly 80 years old. He falls asleep in his chair after lunch. And Graham? Graham is a lovely boy, but he is not a nanny. She straightened up, adjusting her blazer. I have set up the nursery at my house, she announced. I hired a night nurse to start this evening. I will take the baby for 6 weeks, just until you are walking again. It makes the most sense. It is the only responsible choice. It sounded so logical. If you didn't know her, if you were just a bystander in the hallway, you would think she was a saint stepping in to save a drowning family. No, I said. Marlene's eyes narrowed slightly. Excuse me? I said no. You are not taking her. Not for 6 weeks. Not for 6 minutes. Stella, you are being irrational, she hissed, the smile slipping. This is the postpartum depression talking. You are unstable. You are hurting your child because of your own ego. I am not unstable. I said, I am protecting her. From what? From her grandmother who loves her? Marlene's voice rose, attracting looks. I have legal authority. Stella, I filed the papers this morning. I am trying to do this the easy way. But if you want to make it hard, I can show them the POA. I have authority over your decisions when you are incapacitated, she declared. And look at you. You are in a wheelchair. On narcotics. You are the definition of incapacitated. That was the moment Everett stepped in. He had been standing quietly behind Jonah, blending into the background. Now he moved forward. He didn't look like a frail old man. He looked like a mountain. Marlene, he said. Marlene flinched. She hadn't noticed him. Dad, I didn't see you. Everett didn't look at her outfit or her flowers. He looked right into her eyes. You refused the baby. Marlene, he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a finality that silenced the hallway. I didn't refuse. Marlene stammered, her composure cracking. You refused, Everett repeated. I was on the phone. The social worker was on the phone. You said no. You don't get to claim her now. Marlene's face flushed a patchy, ugly red. I am doing what is best for the family, she snapped. Stella is a mess. Look at this chaos. The only chaos here is you. Everett said, Go home, Marlene. Take your flowers and go home. Marlene looked around. She saw the nurses watching with guarded expressions. She saw Jonah, the lawyer, taking notes on a yellow pad. She saw Graham glaring at her. She saw me, broken but unmoving. She realized she had lost the audience. She straightened her spine, pulling the dignity around her like a cloak. Fine, she said, her voice dripping with ice, if you want to play it this way. But when you are drowning in dirty diapers and medical bills, do not call me. She turned on her heel and walked away. She didn't look back. The sound of her heels faded down the corridor, leaving a silence that felt heavy and vibrating. I let out a breath and slumped in the chair. Get me back to the room, I whispered. Back in the room. The adrenaline crash was severe. I was shaking uncontrollably. The nurses helped me back into bed and increased my pain medication. But my mind was racing. She has a POA. I said to Jonah. She said she filed it. Jonah was already on his laptop. I am looking at the metadata right now. He said. He turned the screen so I could see. It was a digital copy of the document Marlene had mentioned. Here is the thing, Jonah said, pointing to a string of numbers at the bottom of the screen. This document was uploaded to the county clerk's portal at 8:30 this morning. The IP address traces back to a commercial internet provider, specifically, the one used by Morgan Realty Group. Her office. He scrolled down to the signature page. Is that your signature? He asked. I looked at the scrawl. It was my name. It looked like my handwriting. It looks like it, I said, but I never saw this document. I signed a single page about insurance. This is 12 pages long. Jonah nodded grimly. It is a digital lift. She likely scanned the signature page from the insurance document you signed. The decoy. and attached it to this power of attorney. Or, she slipped the signature page into the stack you signed without you reading the header. It is fraud, Graham said, his voice rising. It is forgery. It is hard to prove without the original physical copy, Jonah cautioned. She will claim Stella signed it knowingly, but the timing is our weapon. She uploaded it immediately after the accident. It shows premeditation. It shows she was waiting for an opportunity. She wanted to be the hero, I said, staring at the ceiling. She wanted me to fail so she could step in. That is why she refused the baby at first. She needed the crisis to be real. She needed me to be helpless. Graham made a noise in his throat, a choked, strangled sound. I looked at him. He was standing by the window, his back to us. Graham? He turned around. His face was gray. There is something else, he said. What? Graham swallowed hard. Last month, when you were about 8 months pregnant, Marlene took me out to lunch. I frowned. You told me you went to lunch. You said she just wanted to talk about the baby shower. She did, Graham said. But then, she started talking about how tired we were going to be. How expensive babies are. She asked about my student loans. He paused, looking down at his shoes. She offered me money. Stella. What kind of money? Everett asked sharply. She said she had a special fund set aside. Graham said, she said that if I felt overwhelmed, or if I felt like I wasn't ready to be a full-time dad, she could help me out. She offered me $20,000 to step aside for a while. The room went dead silent. Step aside? I repeated. What does that mean? She said you would need her more than you needed me, Graham said, his voice cracking. She said men usually just get in the way during the first year. She said if I took a job in another city, or just moved out for 6 months, she would pay off my car and give me $20,000 cash. She called it a transition bonus. I felt bile rise in my throat. My mother had tried to bribe the father of my child to abandon us. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. I was ashamed. Graham cried. I felt like she thought I was a loser, like I could be bought. I told her no, obviously. I told her to go to hell, but she just laughed. She said, think about it. The offer stands. I looked at Jonah. This isn't just a controlling mother. I said, This is a conspiracy, Jonah said, his face hard. She is systematically trying to isolate you. She tried to remove the father. She tried to legally incapacitate the mother. She is clearing the board. My sadness evaporated. The last lingering shreds of the daughter who wanted her mommy to love her burned away in the heat of a cold, white rage. She tried to buy my family. I looked at Jonah. What do I need to do? I asked. I am done crying. Tell me what to do to bury her. Jonah pulled his chair closer. First, we document everything, he said. We write down the bribe. We write down the refusal to come to the hospital. We write down the conversation in the hallway. We need a timeline of her aggression. Second, Jonah continued, you never speak to her alone again. Never. If she calls, you let it go to voicemail. If she shows up, you have a witness. She is going to try to get you to say something angry, something she can record and play for a judge to prove you are unstable. You have to be ice. You have to be boring. Ice. I repeated, I can do ice. Everett cleared his throat. There is one more thing, he said. He walked over to the bed. He looked older than he had 10 minutes ago. It is about the money, Everett said. What money? I asked. The money she is using to bribe Graham. The money she is using to run her life. It is not all hers. He sighed, a heavy rattling sound in his chest. Years ago, when your grandmother passed, I set up a family trust. It was meant to be for you, Stella, for your education, for your first house. Marlene was the trustee because you were a minor. And I have been trying to get the statements for 6 months, Everett said. She keeps stalling. She says she is reinvesting it. She says the market is volatile. But last week, she brought me papers to sign. She said they were updates to the trust terms. Did you sign them? Jonah asked. No. Everett said, I told her I wanted my lawyer to read them first. She got furious. She threw a vase against the wall. She screamed that I didn't trust her own daughter. He looked at me, his eyes full of regret. I think the money is gone. Stella. Or a lot of it. And the papers she wanted me to sign? I think they were to cover her tracks, to make the missing money look like authorized transfers. And if she gets custody of the baby, Jonah mused, if she gets custody of the baby and guardianship of Stella, she controls the beneficiaries. Everett finished. She can hide the theft. She can use the baby's expenses to drain whatever is left legally. It all clicked into place. The accident wasn't just a chance for her to play mother. It was a lifeline for her fraud. If she controlled me, she controlled the questions. She could silence Everett by holding me hostage. My accident was her winning lottery ticket. I said, my phone buzzed again. Another text? Graham asked. No, I said, looking at the screen. A voicemail. Play it, Jonah said. Put it on speaker. I pressed the button. Marlene's voice filled the room. It was soft, trembling, sounding for all the world like a heartbroken mother. Stella, honey, it's Mom. I'm just leaving the hospital. I'm so worried about you. I know you are confused right now, and I know Everett is putting ideas in your head. He's getting senile. Honey, you know that. I just want to help. I have the nursery ready. I am doing this for you. Her voice paused. There was a shift in tone. The tremble vanished. The steel came through. But you need to be careful. Stella, if you push me away, if you listen to these people who don't care about you, you are going to regret it. I am the only one who can really protect you. If you fight me, you will lose everything you think you have. Don't make me do what I have to do. Call me. The message ended. The room was silent. Save it, Jonah said. That is a threat. I saved the message. I backed it up to the cloud. I emailed it to Jonah. I lay back on the pillows. My body was broken. My pelvis was shattered. But my mind was clearer than it had been in years. She thinks I am weak, I said to the room. She thinks I am the same little girl who used to apologize when she yelled at me. I looked at the baby, sleeping in the bassinet by the window. She is wrong. I said, I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to visualize the war ahead. She wants a fight? I whispered. She just got one. The morphine button was a small, plastic device clipped to my hospital sheet, but looking at it now, I realized it was the most dangerous object in the room. Jonah sat by the window, the morning light reflecting off his glasses. He had been on the phone for an hour, his voice low and professional, but now he turned to me with a specific, hard instruction. We need your records. Stella, Jonah said, we need the full medication log starting from the moment the ambulance doors opened. I adjusted my position, wincing as the pins in my hip ground together. Why? To prove you were out of your mind, Jonah said bluntly. If Marlene claims you signed a power of attorney yesterday or the day before, or if she claims you verbally authorized her to take the baby during a phone call, we need to prove you were chemically incompetent to make legal decisions. I felt a cold shiver that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was a violation of a different sort. My pain, which had felt so private and overwhelming, was now evidence. My vulnerability was a data point. I called the nurse. When she brought the log, Jonah scanned it, his finger tracing the lines. Here, he said, tapping the paper, dilaudid. Fentanyl in the trauma bay, morphine drip post-op. Stella, you were flying. If you signed a document yesterday, a judge would throw it out before the ink was dry. But the document she filed was dated before the accident. I reminded him. She backdated it. Jonah nodded. Exactly. But she might try to claim you reaffirmed it verbally when you spoke to her. We are going to close that door. You were not capable of reaffirming a pizza order, let alone a custody agreement. The reality of what my mother had done settled over me like a heavy blanket. She had looked at my broken body and seen an opportunity. She had calculated the dosage of my painkillers and realized they made me an easy target. While I digested this, Everett was sitting in the corner, staring at his hands. He had been quiet all morning. I need to make another call, Everett said suddenly. He stood up, his joints popping. He didn't look at me. He looked at Jonah. You said you know people in the state investigator's office. Everett said, the unit that handles fraud. Yes, Jonah said, closing his laptop. The Elder Exploitation and Financial Fraud Unit. Why? Everett walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where the rain was starting to fall. Because it isn't just Stella, Everett said softly. I think she has been doing it to me, too, for a long time. Jonah picked up his phone. I will make the introduction. If we can link the document fraud regarding the baby to a pattern of financial abuse against you, it stops being a family dispute. It becomes a criminal enterprise. Jonah stepped into the hallway to make the call. The phrase, criminal enterprise, hung in the room. This was my mother, the woman who taught me how to braid hair, the woman who bought my prom dress. We were discussing her like she was a stranger running a Ponzi scheme. 2 hours later, the suspicion turned into fact. Everett's flip phone rang. It was a ringtone that sounded like a shrill, digital cricket. He answered it, frowning. Hello? He listened, his eyebrows pulled together. Yes, this is Everett Hale. He listened again. He sat down slowly in the vinyl chair, his face losing the little color it had. No, he said, I did not authorize that. I am in the hospital with my granddaughter. I haven't been to the bank in 2 weeks. He paused. What do you mean? A new user? I watched him, my heart hammering. Graham stopped pacing and stood still. Okay, Everett said. Freeze it. Freeze everything. The checking, the savings, the trust. No one touches a dime. I will be there in person tomorrow if I have to crawl. He hung up the phone and looked at us. He looked sick. That was the bank manager at First National. Everett said. His voice was trembling. Someone tried to transfer $15,000 from my primary savings account to an external account about an hour ago. Marlene? I asked. The transfer was flagged because it was over the daily limit, Everett said. But that isn't the worst part. The manager said a request came in electronically yesterday afternoon to add a new, authorized user to the account. Let me guess, Jonah said from the doorway. Marlene Morgan? Everett nodded. She used the same power of attorney document she filed for Stella. She must have slipped my name into the fine print, or forged a second one. She tried to take control of my liquid assets while I was sitting here holding your hand. $15,000, Graham whispered. That is almost exactly the amount she offered me to leave. She was going to use my grandfather's money to bribe my boyfriend to abandon me. I realized the symmetry of it was almost impressive. It was a closed loop of destruction. I felt a sudden, sharp need to know what she was telling people. If she was moving money and filing papers, she was also managing the narrative. Marlene never did anything without a PR strategy. Graham, I said, where is your phone? He handed it to me. I logged into my social media accounts, which I hadn't touched since the accident. My notifications were a wall of red, hundreds of comments, messages, tags. I clicked on Marlene's profile. There it was, a photo posted 6 hours ago. It was a picture of an empty crib in her house, the nursery she claimed she had set up. The caption read, heartbroken but stepping up. Sometimes, new mothers just aren't ready, and tragedy exposes the cracks. When the parents walk away, the grandparents step in. Praying for my daughter's mental health and healing. Baby girl is safe with family, even if it's not the way we planned. Grandma's love. Stepping up addiction awareness. I gasped, dropping the phone on the sheets. Addiction awareness? I choked out. Graham grabbed the phone. He read the caption and his face went purple. She is implying you are an addict? Graham shouted. She is telling the world you abandoned the baby? She is setting the stage, Jonah said, his voice calm but cold. She knows the court looks at stability. If she paints you as an unstable addict who walked away after the accident, and herself as the noble savior with the empty crib, she wins the court of public opinion before the judge even bangs the gavel. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my cousin. Beth, Stella, I saw your mom's post. I had no idea you were struggling with pills again. I know we haven't talked much, but please let Marlene help with the baby. She is so worried. Again? I had never struggled with pills. I took Tylenol for headaches. Marlene had invented a history of addiction to explain why I was currently on hospital-grade painkillers. I threw the phone at the foot of the bed. "She is destroying me," I said, the tears finally spilling over. "She is burning my life down so she can rule over the ashes. We need to correct the record," Graham said fiercely. "I will post something. I will tell them—" "No," Jonah interrupted. "Do not engage on social media. It looks like a catfight. We fight this with evidence, not comments." I looked at Graham. He looked ready to punch a wall. But there was something else in his eyes. Guilt. Graham sat down on the edge of the bed. He took my hand. "Stella," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something else." I looked at him. "What now?" "You know how Marlene has been handling the car insurance?" he asked. "And how she offered me the money?" "Yes. It wasn't the first time I let her handle things," Graham admitted. I pulled my hand away slightly. "What do you mean?" "6 months ago," Graham said, looking down at my cast. "When we were looking at life insurance policies, you remember?" I nodded. "We wanted to get term life policies before the baby came. Marlene called me." Graham said, "She told me I was getting ripped off. She said she had a broker who could get us a better deal. She told me to send her our social security numbers and our driver's license information. She said she would take care of the paperwork so we wouldn't have to deal with the stress." I stared at him. "And you did it?" "I did," Graham said miserably. "I sent her everything. Copies of our licenses, our social security numbers, our bank routing numbers for the premiums. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because she told me you were stressed about money," Graham said. "She said, 'Let's just handle this, Graham, and surprise her with the savings.' I thought I was being helpful. I thought I was being a good partner." I closed my eyes. That was how she did it. That was how she got the information to forge the power of attorney. That was how she accessed the bank accounts. Graham had handed her the keys to our castle because he didn't want to rock the boat. "I am so sorry, Stella," Graham said, his voice breaking. "I was just intimidated by her. She is so certain about everything." I felt like a child when I talked to her. I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. I saw the weakness. But I also saw the love. He was here, now. He wasn't taking the bribe. He wasn't running away. I reached out and took his hand again. "You were not the only one." I said softly, "I signed the papers too. Remember? The insurance papers. We both let her in." Graham squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "Never again." He swore, "I don't care if she offers me $1 million. I don't care if she threatens to ruin my career. I am with you. We are going to need that anger." I said, "Because she has our identity. She has everything." Just then, there was a polite knock on the door. A woman in a gray suit entered. She wore a badge that said Hospital Administration. "Mrs. Morgan? Mr. Hale?" she asked. "Yes," Everett said, standing up. "I am Ms. Corinne, the Director of Patient Relations. I wanted to speak with you briefly about an incident that occurred earlier today." My stomach tightened. "Did she get in?" "No. Ms. Corinne assured me, but I wanted you to be aware. Mrs. Marlene Morgan requested a meeting with the Chief of Surgery this morning. She did not ask about your medical condition. She asked about making a substantial donation to the pediatric wing." "A donation?" Everett asked. "Yes. She intimated that she was looking to name a new recovery room. During the conversation, she repeatedly mentioned that she was the primary decision-maker for the infant currently in our nursery and asked if the donation could facilitate a smoother discharge process." My jaw dropped. "She tried to bribe the hospital. I hope you told her to get out." Everett growled. "We declined the donation, Ms. Corinne said coolly, and we informed her that discharge decisions are based on medical and legal protocols, not philanthropy, but I wanted to document this with you. It was highly irregular. It felt like pressure." "Thank you for telling us," Jonah said, writing furiously on his pad. "This goes to intent. She is trying to buy custody." Ms. Corinne nodded and left. "She is desperate," Jonah said. "She knows the legal route is shaky. So she is trying to use money and social leverage. I felt a surge of panic. If she is that desperate, what will she do next? The door opened again. This time, it wasn't a suit. It was a whirlwind of curls, oversized glasses, and a tote bag that looked heavy enough to contain bricks. Kendra. My best friend since high school stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene, the IVs, the traction, the exhaustion in the room. "Okay," she said, dropping the bag on the floor with a thud. "I got the text from Graham. Who do I need to kill?" "Kendra," I breathed. She walked over and kissed my forehead. "Careful of the tubes. You look like hell." "Babe," she said affectionately, "I feel like hell." Kendra turned to the room. "Okay." Graham filled me in on the drive over. "Marlene is going full mommy dearest." I brought the ammunition. She started pulling things out of her bag. A laptop, a hard drive, 3 notebooks. I went back through our texts. "Stella," Kendra said, booting up her computer. "Me and you. For the last 3 years. Every time you complained about her, every time she canceled on you, every time she made a weird comment about money. I screenshotted it all." She turned the screen to me. It was a timeline, color-coded. "Look at this," Kendra said, pointing to a cluster of dates 3 months ago. "Remember when she lost your birth certificate and asked you to order a new one to her address?" "Yes," I said. "She said it would be safer in her safe." "And remember when she asked for your email password because she wanted to send herself a recipe she couldn't find?" I nodded. "I checked the logs." Kendra said, "That was the same day your bank password was reset." I felt sick. She had been planning this for months, maybe years. And the voicemails. Kendra continued. "I have 4 voicemails from her on my phone where she complains that you are too weak to be a mother and that she wishes she could just take over. You have that recorded?" Jonah asked, looking up sharply. "Date and time stamped," Kendra said, tapping her phone. "I never deleted them because they were so unhinged I thought I might need to play them for a therapist one day. Guess I am playing them for a judge instead." Jonah actually smiled. "That is gold. Kendra, absolute gold. It proves premeditation. It proves she views the baby as a possession to be acquired." Kendra sat down next to Graham. "We are going to bury her in paper. Stella, we are going to make her regret she ever learned how to text." Having Kendra there was like having a reinforcements regiment arrive. She organized the screenshots. She transcribed the voicemails. She created a digital fortress of truth to counter Marlene's lies. But as the afternoon wore on, the emotional toll began to show on Everett. He sat in the corner, watching Kendra and Jonah work. He looked small. "Grandpa?" I said. He looked up. His eyes were wet. "I need to stretch my legs," he said. He walked out. I looked at Graham. "Stay here." I buzzed the nurse. "I need the chair again. You just got back in bed." "Mrs. Morgan, I need to go see my grandfather." I said, "Please." 10 minutes later, I found him in the hospital chapel. It was a small, quiet room with generic stained glass and rows of empty chairs. Everett was sitting in the back row, his head in his hands. I rolled my wheelchair up next to him. I reached out and touched his arm. "Grandpa." He didn't look up. I let it happen. "Stella," he whispered. "No, you didn't. You didn't know. I knew," he said, lifting his head. His face was ravaged with guilt. "I knew she was like this. I knew she was controlling. I knew she was greedy. I saw how she treated your father before he left. I saw how she treated you growing up." "Then why?" I asked gently. "Because I was afraid," he admitted. "I was afraid that if I confronted her, she would cut me off. She would keep me from you. And after your grandmother died, you were all I had left. I thought if I just kept the peace, if I just let her have her way with the small things, I could still be in your life." He looked at me, tears tracking through the stubble on his cheeks. "I sold my pride to buy time with you, Stella. And because I didn't stop her, she got strong enough to try to crush you. I fed the monster because I didn't want to be alone. My heart broke for him. He had been a hostage, too. You are here now," I said fiercely. "You are the one who called Jonah. You are the one who stood in the hallway. You saved us. Grandpa, I should have saved you 20 years ago." he said. "We can't fix 20 years ago." I said, "We can only fix today, and today, I need you to be the wall. I need you to be the grandfather who taught me how to fish, not the one who signed the checks to keep the peace." Everett took a deep breath. He wiped his face with a handkerchief. "You have him," he said. "You have the fisherman, and the fighter." He stood up, looking stronger. "Let's go back. Jonah is waiting." Back in the room. The mood had shifted from investigative to preparatory. Jonah had a stack of index cards. "We have a hearing," Jonah announced. "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning, 800 hours. Emergency session. It is technically an ex parte hearing, but because I filed a preemptive notice of representation, the judge is allowing us to be present." "What happens?" Graham asked. "Marlene's lawyer will argue that Stella is incapacitated and that the baby is in immediate danger of neglect." Jonah explained. "They will ask for temporary emergency guardianship." "And we argue what?" I asked. "We argue that the baby is safe," Jonah said. "We argue that the mother is conscious and directing care. We argue that the grandmother has a conflict of interest due to financial malfeasance." He handed me a card. "Stella, you might have to testify via video," Jonah said. "If you do, you have to be perfect." I looked at the card. It had 3 bullet points. 1. The baby is safe. 2. I am making the decisions. 3. My mother is not a caregiver. She is a danger. Jonah looked me in the eye. "She is going to try to trigger you. Stella, her lawyer will ask if you are on drugs. He will ask if you have a history of depression. He will ask if you feel overwhelmed." "I am overwhelmed," I said. "I was in a car crash." "You cannot say that," Jonah said sharply. "If you say, 'I am overwhelmed,' they write it down as admission of inability to parent. You say, 'I am recovering from physical injuries, but my parenting plan is robust and active.'" I repeated it. "My parenting plan is robust and active." "You cannot cry," Jonah said. "I know it is unfair. I know you are in pain, but if you cry, they see hysterical. You have to be ice, ice," I whispered. Graham squeezed my shoulder. "You can do this." We spent the next 2 hours rehearsing. Kendra played the role of the nasty opposing attorney. She asked me horrible questions. "Isn't it true you can't even hold your baby without help?" "I utilize support for lifting, but I provide the care and bonding. Didn't you beg your mother to come because you were panicked?" I contacted my next of kin in an emergency. Her refusal to assist does not constitute my inability to parent. By the time evening fell, I was exhausted, but I felt sharpened. I was a weapon forged in the fire of my mother's betrayal. The sun went down, casting long shadows across the room. We were eating takeout sandwiches, the mood somber but determined. Then, the door opened. It wasn't a nurse. It wasn't a doctor. It was a stranger. A man in a cheap windbreaker holding a manila envelope. "Stella Morgan?" he asked. "Yes." "You have been served." He dropped the envelope on the tray table and walked out. Jonah grabbed it before I could. He ripped it open. He scanned the top page. His face went grim. "What is it?" I asked. Jonah looked up. "She didn't wait for our motion," he said. "She filed first." He turned the paper around. "Petition for temporary guardianship, due to incapacity. Petitioner, Marlene Morgan, respondent. Stella Morgan." "She is claiming you are comatose?" Graham asked, looking at the header. "No," Jonah said, reading rapidly. "She is claiming psychological incapacity induced by trauma and narcotic dependency. She has attached an affidavit claiming you threatened self-harm in the trauma bay." I gasped. "I never—" "And," Jonah continued, his voice dropping, "she is claiming Graham is an accessory to neglect and has attached a statement saying he solicited money from her to leave the state." Graham stood up, knocking his chair over. "She twisted it. She twisted the bribe. She is framing it as if Graham asked for the money," Jonah said, "and she refused him. She is painting herself as the only moral actor in the tragedy." I looked at the papers. They were thick, heavy. They represented a meticulously constructed alternate reality where my mother was the hero and I was the villain. The fight wasn't just coming, it was here, and it was going to be public. I looked at Everett. I looked at Graham. I looked at Kendra. She thinks she can write the story, I said, my voice steady, cold as the winter wind. She thinks because she filed first. She wins. I reached for the water cup, my hand not shaking. She forgot one thing. I said, "What?" Graham asked. She forgot that the truth has receipts. I said, "And we have all of them." I looked at Jonah. "What time is court?" 8 a.m., Jonah said. "I will be ready," I said. The room was quiet. But it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of soldiers checking their weapons before dawn. My mother wanted a war for my child. She was about to find out that she had picked a fight with the wrong woman. The courtroom in Caldwell County smelled of furniture polish and old paper. A dry, dusty scent that seemed designed to suck the moisture out of your throat. I was sitting in my wheelchair next to the defendant's table. My left leg extended and propped up. My hands folded in my lap. I was wearing a soft gray dress that Kendra had run out to buy because nothing I owned fit over the cast. I had done my hair. I had put on light makeup. I looked injured, but I did not look broken. Across the aisle, my mother, Marlene, looked like she was attending a coronation. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that was aggressively tasteful, a string of pearls, and shoes that cost more than my first car. She sat with her back perfectly straight, her hands clasped on top of a thick navy blue binder. On the spine of the binder, in clear, bold label maker font, were the words, "Baby's best interest." It was a prop. The whole morning was a prop. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that the painkillers couldn't dull. But I kept my face still. Jonah had told me, "Ice, be ice, all rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Beverly Thorne swept into the room. She was a woman in her 60s with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. She didn't look at me, and she didn't look at Marlene. She looked at the file in front of her. "We are here for an emergency hearing regarding the temporary guardianship of the minor child. Born 2 weeks ago," Judge Thorne said, reading from the page. "Petitioner is Marlene Morgan, maternal grandmother. Respondent is Stella Morgan, biological mother." She looked up over her reading glasses. "I have read the petition," Judge Thorne said. "The allegations here are serious. Incapacity, narcotics dependency, child neglect." "Let us get right to it. Mr. Davis, you represent the grandmother?" Mr. Davis, a man with a shiny suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes, stood up. "We do, Your Honor," he said, "and we are here with heavy hearts. This is not a step a grandmother takes lightly. Mrs. Morgan is here solely to ensure the safety of a newborn who is currently in a chaotic and dangerous situation." "Dangerous how?" Judge Thorne asked. "The mother was in a catastrophic car accident just 3 days ago," Mr. Davis said, gesturing to me. "She is currently on high doses of opioids. She is physically unable to lift the child. The biological father, Mr. Weller, has admitted to financial instability and has previously deferred all decision-making to my client. We have a newborn baby effectively in limbo, being cared for by hospital staff, while the mother hallucinates in a trauma ward." He paused for effect. "Mrs. Morgan is simply asking for temporary emergency guardianship until Stella is rehabilitated. She has a fully equipped nursery. She has the financial means. She has the power of attorney documents signed by the mother prior to the accident. Granting her this very authority," I felt Graham stiffen beside me. I placed a hand on his arm to keep him seated. Judge Thorne turned her gaze to Jonah. "Mr. Crest?" Jonah stood up. He didn't gesture. He didn't raise his voice. He simply adjusted his glasses. "Your Honor, this petition is a work of fiction," Jonah said. "Mr. Davis bristled. "Objection." Jonah ignored him. "The narrative you just heard relies on the idea that the grandmother is stepping in to fill a void. The evidence will show that there was no void. There was a refusal." Judge Thorne frowned. "Clarify." "Mr. Crest." Jonah picked up a single sheet of paper. "Timeline." "Your Honor," Jonah said, The accident occurred on Tuesday at 2:14 in the afternoon. At 3:30, from the trauma bay, my client, Stella Morgan, called her mother. She asked her to take the baby. And? Judge Thorne asked, and Marlene Morgan refused. Jonah said. He turned to look at Marlene. She stated she had a social engagement, a library gala, and could not be burdened. She told her daughter, who was bleeding internally, to let the father's side handle it. Marlene shook her head subtly, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. Jonah continued. It was only after my client secured an alternative care plan, one involving the father and the great-grandfather, that Mrs. Morgan became interested. And she didn't become interested in helping. She became interested in legal authority. Jonah walked to the table and picked up the hospital social worker's report. We have Mrs. Gable, the hospital social worker, present to testify. Jonah said, she will confirm that the baby has never been in limbo. She has been under the continuous, authorized supervision of the father, Graham Weller, and the great-grandfather, Everett Hale, per the mother's direct instructions. Call your witness, Judge Thorne said. Mrs. Gable took the stand. She looked nervous but determined. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, wearing her hospital ID badge. Mrs. Gable, Jonah asked, was the infant ever abandoned or neglected? No, Mrs. Gable said clearly. The baby was admitted for observation. Once she was cleared, we followed Mrs. Morgan's care plan. The father has been present. The great-grandfather has been present. The baby is currently in the mother's room, being cared for by the family. Did Mrs. Marlene Morgan ever offer to assist the hospital staff? Jonah asked. She called the unit. Mrs. Gable said, but not to offer care. She called to ask if she could bypass the discharge protocols. She refused to come to the hospital physically until yesterday. When she arrived with flowers and demanded custody, Judge Thorne looked at Marlene. Marlene was writing furiously on a notepad. Her lips pursed. Cross-examination? Judge Thorne asked. Mr. Davis stood up. He walked over to Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable, you say the father is present. Is it not true that Mr. Weller appeared distraught and confused when he arrived? He was upset. Mrs. Gable said his partner had just been crushed in a car. And the mother? Mr. Davis pressed. Is it not true that Stella Morgan is currently prescribed Dilaudid and morphine? Yes. For post-surgical pain. Does Dilaudid affect cognitive function? It can, Mrs. Gable admitted. So, Mr. Davis said, turning to the judge, we have a mother on narcotics and a father who is upset. This is hardly a stable environment for a 2-week-old infant. My client offers a drug-free, stable, luxury home environment. Why are we even debating this? I saw the judge nod slightly. The argument was seductive. Safety versus chaos. Jonah stood up again. We are debating this, Your Honor, because stability that is bought with fraud is not stability, it is captivity. He looked at me. I would like to call Stella Morgan to the stand. Getting to the witness stand was a humiliation in itself. Graham had to wheel me to the gate, and the bailiff had to help me transfer to the chair. I gritted my teeth, sweat breaking out on my forehead, but I refused to groan. I sat down, arranging my cast. I looked at Marlene. She was looking at me with that same expression she used when I was a teenager and had a pimple, a mix of pity and distaste. Jonah stood in front of me. Stella, Jonah asked softly, do you love your daughter? More than anything. I said, are you in pain right now? Yes, considerable pain. Does that pain prevent you from making decisions about your daughter's welfare? No, I said firmly. It prevents me from carrying her. It prevents me from changing her diaper while standing up. It does not prevent me from knowing who is safe and who is not. Mr. Davis stood up for cross-examination. He buttoned his jacket. He looked like a shark smelling blood. Mrs. Morgan, he said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. You have had a terrible week. We all see that. I said nothing. You are on medication, correct? Yes. Do you feel overwhelmed? I paused. I heard Jonah's voice in my head. Do not say overwhelmed. I feel injured. I said clearly, "But you are crying a lot, aren't you? The nurses noted you were crying yesterday. You were hysterical in the hallway. I was confronting a woman who was trying to steal my child." I said, "That is an appropriate emotional response." Mr. Davis smiled condescendingly. "Steal? That is a harsh word for a grandmother who wants to help. You seem very angry." "Stella, postpartum depression often manifests as anger, doesn't it?" He was gaslighting me in open court. He was taking my righteous defense of my family and twisting it into a diagnosis. "I am not depressed," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "and I am not unstable. I am a mother who woke up from surgery to find that her own mother hadn't visited, hadn't called to check on her survival, but had called the billing department to get my social security number." "Mr. Davis frowned. "That is speculation." "No," I said, "it is in the phone logs." Mr. Davis tried to pivot. "Let's talk about your capacity. You signed a document giving your mother authority. You signed it because you knew you couldn't handle things, didn't you? Even before the accident." "I did not." I said, "We have the document here." "Mr. Davis said, waving a sheaf of papers. "A power of attorney, signed by you." I looked at the judge. "Your Honor," I said, "I signed a one-page document regarding insurance beneficiaries. I never signed a 12-page custody agreement." Jonah stepped forward. "Your Honor, this brings us to the second exhibit." Jonah handed a folder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "Mr. Davis claims this document proves Stella's intent to yield control. We have analyzed the metadata of the file uploaded to the county clerk." Judge Thorne opened the folder. The document was created and uploaded at 8:38 a.m. on the morning of the accident. Jonah said, "The signature page, however, has a pixelation density that differs from the rest of the document. It was a digital lift, copied and pasted." Mr. Davis looked stunned. He looked at Marlene. Marlene didn't look at him. She was staring straight ahead, her jaw set. "Furthermore," Jonah continued, "we have records from the hospital at the exact time this document was allegedly being reaffirmed by my client in the trauma bay. She was unconscious." Judge Thorne looked at the papers closely. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "Mr. Davis," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "can you explain why your client filed a power of attorney document 10 minutes after a near-fatal car accident, using an IP address registered to her real estate office?" Mr. Davis shuffled his papers. I am not aware of the technical details, Your Honor. My client was simply trying to be efficient in a crisis." "Efficient?" Judge Thorne repeated. "Or opportunistic?" Jonah wasn't done. "It establishes a pattern, Your Honor, a pattern of financial and emotional exploitation. And to speak to that pattern, we have one final witness." Jonah turned to the back of the room. "We call Everett Hale." Everett stood up. He walked slowly to the stand, leaning heavily on his cane. He looked every one of his 78 years, but his eyes were clear. He took the oath. He sat down. "Mr. Hale," Jonah said, "you are Marlene Morgan's father?" "I am," Everett said. "And you are the creator of the Hale Family Trust?" "Yes. I set it up 20 years ago, to provide for Stella." "Who is the trustee?" "Marlene is," Everett said, "or she was." Jonah handed another document to the judge. "Mr. Hale, did you recently authorize any changes to that trust?" "No," Everett said. "Did you authorize the addition of a new user to your personal savings account yesterday?" "No, sir." "Did you authorize a transfer of $15,000 this morning?" "I did not." Everett looked at the judge. His hands were shaking on the railing of the witness box. "Your Honor," he said, his voice cracking, "I need to say something." "Go ahead." "Mr. Hale," Judge Thorne said gently, I let this happen," Everett said, "for years. I let Marlene run things. I let her control the money. I let her control the narrative. I saw how she bullied Stella. I saw how she manipulated people." "Why?" Jonah asked. "Because I am scared of her," Everett whispered. The courtroom went silent. Even the court reporter paused. "She is my daughter," Everett said, tears spilling onto his cheeks. But she is cruel. She knows how to hurt you where you are weakest. She threatened to cut me off from Stella if I asked questions about the money. She threatened to put me in a home. I stayed quiet because I wanted to see my granddaughter grow up. He looked at Marlene. Marlene was staring at him with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. It was a look that could peel paint, but she crossed the line, Everett said, his voice gaining strength. When she left Stella in that hospital, when she tried to sell the baby's father on leaving town, I couldn't be quiet anymore. He looked at the judge. She doesn't want the baby. Your Honor, she wants the asset. She wants the control. She wants to be the victim and the hero at the same time. The baby is just a prop to her. Just like I was. Marlene stood up. This is ridiculous, she snapped. Sit down. Mrs. Morgan, Judge Thorne barked. He is senile, Marlene cried, her polished mask fracturing. He is confused. I have taken care of him for years. I pay his bills. I manage his life because he can't do it himself. She turned to me, pointing a manicured finger. And you ungrateful little brat, I gave you everything. I bought you that car. I paid for your college. And this is how you repay me? By dragging me into court? By letting this nobody lawyer slander me? She was screaming now. The baby's best interest binder had fallen to the floor, spilling papers everywhere. That baby is a Morgan, Marlene yelled. She is part of my legacy. You are going to ruin her just like you ruined your own potential. You are weak. Stella, you have always been weak. I looked at her. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I saw her clearly for the first time. She wasn't a giant. She was just a loud, greedy woman who was terrified of losing control. Judge Thorne slammed her gavel. The sound was like a gunshot. Enough, the judge shouted. Bailiff, if she speaks again, remove her. Marlene froze. She looked around the room, breathing hard. She saw the shock on her lawyer's face. She saw the disgust on the judge's face. She saw me, watching her with ice in my veins. She sat down slowly, smoothing her skirt, but the damage was absolute. She had shown the court exactly who she was. Judge Thorne took a deep breath. She adjusted her robe. I have heard enough, Judge Thorne said. She looked at Mr. Davis, counselor. Your petition for emergency guardianship is denied. With prejudice. She turned to me. The court finds that Stella Morgan, despite her physical injuries, is capable, lucid, and actively parenting through her designated proxies. The court recognizes Graham Weller and Everett Hale as the authorized caregivers under the mother's direction. She turned back to Marlene. Mrs. Morgan, you are hereby restrained from removing the child from any medical facility or residence. You are restrained from contacting the hospital staff regarding the child's medical records. You are restrained from accessing the accounts of Stella Morgan or Everett Hale. Judge Thorne picked up the file containing the metadata evidence. Furthermore, she said, her voice turning steel hard, I am referring the evidence regarding the power of attorney document and the bank transfers to the district attorney's office for immediate review. This court takes allegations of elder abuse and fraud very seriously. Marlene's face went white. Court is adjourned, Judge Thorne said. She banged the gavel again. The sound echoed in my chest. It felt like a heartbeat restarting. We did it, Graham whispered, leaning his head against my shoulder. We actually did it. I let out a long exhale. The pain in my hip was screaming, but the weight on my chest was gone. Let's go home, I said. Getting out of the courtroom took time. I had to sign papers. Jonah had to file the temporary order. Everett sat on a bench in the back, looking drained but lighter, as if he had put down a heavy pack he had been carrying for decades. When we finally wheeled out into the hallway, the elevator doors were opening. A woman with a camera and a press badge was standing there. She looked at Marlene, who was arguing with her lawyer near the water fountain. Excuse me, the reporter said. Are you Marlene Morgan, the chair of the library board? Marlene turned, her instincts kicking in. She smoothed her hair. She put on a smile, though it was brittle. Yes, I am, Marlene said. I'm from the Briar Glen Gazette. the reporter said. "I was just checking the docket. Is it true you were just denied guardianship of your granddaughter due to fraud allegations?" Marlene's smile shattered. "No comment." "Mister," Davis barked, stepping in front of her. "No comment." They rushed into the elevator. Marlene looked back at me as the doors closed. Her eyes were wide with panic. She realized that her reputation, her most prized possession, was the next casualty. I watched the numbers on the elevator go down. "She's going to spin this," Jonah warned. "She will tell everyone the judge was biased. She will tell everyone you are lying. Let her talk." I said, "I have the court order." We made our way to the exit, but Marlene hadn't left the building yet. She was waiting in the lobby, near the security checkpoint. She had sent her lawyer to get the car. She saw us coming. She didn't scream this time. She didn't perform. She stood very still, clutching her purse. Graham tried to steer the wheelchair away, but I put my hand on the wheel. "Stop," I said. I looked at her. Marlene stepped closer. She leaned down, bringing her face close to mine. She smelled of gardenias and fear. Her voice was a whisper, low and vibrating with venom. "You won today. Stella," she hissed. "You think you are so smart with your little lawyer and your senile old man." She straightened up, looking down her nose at me. "But you just made enemies you don't understand. You have no idea what I have done to keep this family afloat. You have no idea whose toes you just stepped on." She smiled, and it was the most chilling thing I had ever seen. "Enjoy the baby," she said, "while you can." She turned and walked out the glass doors into the rain. I watched her go. A shiver ran down my spine, cold and sharp. "What did she mean?" Graham asked, his voice uneasy. "She means she isn't done." I said. I looked at Jonah. "She isn't done, is she?" Jonah looked at the doors, where Marlene had vanished. Narcissists never quit. "Stella, they just changed tactics. But enemies you don't understand?" That sounded specific. I thought about the money, the trust, the special fund she offered Graham. She has been moving money for years. I said, maybe she wasn't just stealing from Grandpa. Maybe she was involved in something else, something bigger. Everett walked up beside me. He put his hand on my shoulder. "Whatever it is," he said, his voice gravelly and strong. "We face it together. No more secrets." I nodded. "No more secrets." I agreed. But as we moved toward the exit, into the gray, wet world outside, Marlene's whisper replayed in my head like a loop of tape. "You have no idea whose toes you just stepped on." I held the court order on my lap. It was a shield, but I had a terrible feeling that I was going to need a sword. "Let's go see my daughter," I said. We moved forward, out of the courthouse and into the storm. Coming home was the hardest thing I had ever done physically, but the easiest thing I had ever done emotionally. The ambulance crew transferred me from the stretcher to a rented hospital bed we had set up in the living room. My world had shrunk to a 12 by 12 square of space. The bed, the bassinet, the changing table, and the window overlooking the street, but inside that square, for the first time in my life, there was peace. Graham and Everett built a fortress of routine around me and the baby. They operated with a quiet, military precision that stunned me. Graham took the night shift. He would wake up at 2 a.m. when the baby cried, change her diaper by the light of a dim salt lamp, and bring her to me for feeding. He would sit in the armchair, his eyes heavy with sleep, and whisper stories to her while she nursed. Everett took the day shift. He arrived at 7 every morning, making coffee and oatmeal. He sat by the bassinet for hours, watching her chest rise and fall. His presence a silent guarantee of safety. He managed the medication log for my pain pills. He answered the door. He filtered the mail. There was no screaming. There was no criticism. There was no perfume-scented passive aggression. There was just the rhythmic, exhausting, beautiful work of keeping a human being alive. I realized, watching Graham burp our daughter with gentle, confident pats, that Marlene had lied to me. She had told me I would drown without her. She had told me Graham was weak. She had told me chaos was inevitable. She was wrong. We were tired. Yes. My hip ached with a dull, throbbing persistence that made me grit my teeth. But we were not drowning. We were swimming. The peace was broken on a Thursday. 10 days after the court hearing, Jonah came to the house. He didn't bring a briefcase this time. He brought a file box. He sat on the edge of the sofa, looking at me with an expression that was half pity, half anger. "We got the preliminary report from the state investigator," Jonah said. "Is it bad?" Graham asked, standing behind my bed. "It is extensive," Jonah corrected. "The focus right now is on Everett's accounts. But in the process of auditing the family trust, they found some anomalies linked to you." "Stella." "To me?" I asked. "I have never had access to the trust." "Not the trust," Jonah said. He pulled a folder from the box. "Credit lines." He opened the folder and spread 3 sheets of paper on my blanket. "Do you recognize these accounts?" he asked. I looked at the statements. One was for a department store credit card. One was for a small business line of credit. One was for a utility account for a rental property in a town 2 hours away. "No," I said. "I have a visa and a student loan. That is it. These were opened in your name," Jonah said. "The oldest one dates back to when you were 19. The most recent one was opened 6 months ago." I felt a cold numbness spread through my chest. 19. I was a freshman in college. I was calling home every Sunday, crying because I missed her. "She used my social security number?" I whispered. "She used everything," Jonah said. "She used your identity to open lines of credit, likely to cover gaps in her own cash flow or to leverage debt that wouldn't appear on her own report. She paid the minimums, mostly, so your credit score didn't tank enough to alert you, but she missed a few payments last year. That is why she was so insistent on handling your insurance paperwork and getting your passwords. She needed to scrub the notifications before you saw them." I looked at Everett. He was sitting in the armchair, his face gray. "She stole my name," I said. "She didn't just try to steal my baby. She stole my name. It explains why she was so desperate to get guardianship." Jonah said, "If you had died in that accident, or if you had been declared incapacitated, she would have become the executor of your estate. She could have buried these accounts forever. No one would have ever known." I lay back against the pillows. The ceiling fan spun in slow, hypnotic circles. I felt violated in a way that the car accident hadn't touched. The accident was physics, metal and speed. This was intimacy weaponized. My mother had looked at her teenage daughter and seen a credit mule. She had looked at her pregnant daughter and seen a liability she needed to manage. "Is she going to jail?" Graham asked, his voice hard. "The investigation is ongoing," Jonah said. "Fraud of this magnitude, involving elder abuse and identity theft, carries mandatory prison time. But these cases take months to build. They have to trace every dollar." As if summoned by our discussion of her crimes, a courier van pulled up outside. I saw it through the window. A man walked up the path and knocked. Everett got up to answer it. He came back holding a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was heavy stock, the kind used for wedding invitations. "It is from her," Everett said. He held it like it was radioactive. "Open it," I said. Everett sliced it open with his pocket knife. He pulled out a handwritten letter on personalized stationery. There was a faint scent of gardenias. "My dearest Stella, I am writing this with a broken heart. The court hearing was a terrible misunderstanding. I was emotional, and I know I said things I shouldn't have. I was just so scared for you and the baby. I want to fix this. We are family, and family forgives. I have found a wonderful therapist who specializes in mother-daughter reconciliation. I will pay for everything. We can sit down, talk this through, and put the lawyers behind us. I am willing to drop my petition for custody. I am willing to step back. All I ask is that we start fresh." Enclosed is a simple agreement, just a formality, stating that we are resolving our differences privately. If you sign this, I can unfreeze the trust funds immediately and send you a check for $50,000 to help with the medical bills. Please, honey, don't let strangers tear us apart. I did what I had to do to protect you. Love, Mom. I stared at the paper. The handwriting was beautiful. Looping and elegant. It looked like love. Turn the page, Jonah said. Look at the agreement. Everett flipped to the second sheet. It was a legal document, dense with jargon. Jonah scanned it, letting out a dark chuckle. Here it is, he said, pointing to paragraph 4. The undersigned agrees to waive any and all claims regarding financial mismanagement, identity usage, or administrative errors prior to this date. The undersigned agrees to petition the court to seal all records regarding the guardianship hearing. She isn't apologizing. I said, my voice flat. She is trying to buy a non-disclosure agreement. She knows the investigator's closing in. Jonah said, she needs you to refuse to cooperate. She is offering you $50,000 to stay out of prison. $50,000. That was the price of my dignity. That was the price of my identity. Graham looked at me. What do you want to do? I took the letter from Everett. I crumpled it into a ball. It took effort, my weak hands shaking. But I crushed it. Burn it, I said. Everett took the paper ball. He walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and tossed it in. We watched the cream-colored paper curl and blacken. The scent of gardenias turned into the smell of smoke. I am not bargaining for love anymore. I told them, I am done. My daughter will never learn that affection comes with a contract. She will never learn that she has to sign a waiver to be hugged. The stress of the war, however, had a cost. 2 days later, Everett collapsed in the kitchen. I heard the sound of a glass shattering, then a heavy thud. "Grandpa!" I screamed. Graham ran in from the bedroom. He found Everett on the floor, clutching his chest, his face pale and sweaty. "Call 911!" Graham shouted. The next hour was a blur of terror. The paramedics arrived. They loaded Everett onto the stretcher. I couldn't go. I was stuck in my bed, trapped by my broken pelvis. I had to watch them wheel him out, sobbing, terrified that I had saved him from Marlene, only to lose him to a heart attack. Graham went with him. I stayed with the baby and a neighbor who came over to sit with me. For 3 hours. I stared at the wall. I thought about time. I thought about how much of my grandfather's life had been stolen by fear. He had spent 20 years tiptoeing around Marlene, afraid to speak, afraid to move, afraid to lose me, and the stress of finally standing up had almost killed him. I realized then that I couldn't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. I couldn't spend it fighting Marlene in my head. I had to cut the cord completely, not just legally, spiritually. Graham called at 6 p.m. "He is okay," Graham said, his voice ragged with relief. It wasn't a heart attack. It was stress-induced angina. His heart is strong, but his blood pressure was through the roof. The doctor said he needs absolute calm. "Bring him home," I said, weeping with relief. "Bring him home and we will never mention her name in this house again." But the world outside our house was moving. The following week, the consequences Marlene had warned me about began to land. But not on me. Jonah called with an update. The district attorney had seen enough. They had issued a temporary freeze on all of Marlene's assets pending the fraud investigation. "She can't access her accounts?" I asked. "She can't buy a stick of gum without a court monitor approving it," Jonah said, "and the community is talking. That reporter from the Gazette wrote a story about the guardianship hearing. It ran on page 3. Prominent local philanthropist accused of document fraud." The phone calls started that afternoon. First, it was Aunt Linda, Marlene's sister, who hadn't spoken to me in 5 years because Marlene told her I was difficult. "Stella?" Linda's voice was high and nervous. "I just wanted to check in. I heard about the accident, and, well, I heard some disturbing things about Marlene. Is it true?" "It is true." I said, "Oh my, well, you know, I always suspected she was a bit aggressive. If you need anything, honey, just let me know." Then it was the cousins, then the neighbors. The people who had liked her Facebook post about me abandoning the baby were now sliding into my DMs with apologies and questions. They were rats. I thought the ship was sinking, and they were looking for a new raft. I didn't answer them. I didn't want their fake support. I had the only support I needed. A husband who changed diapers at 3 a.m. and a grandfather who stood up to a tyrant. Then came the final voicemail. It was late on a rainy Tuesday. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to it 5 minutes later. It was Marlene. Her voice was different. It wasn't the polished, public voice. It wasn't the screaming, angry voice. It was hollow. It sounded like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. I know you are listening. Stella, I know you blocked my number. The bank froze my cards today. They embarrassed me at the grocery store. I had to put the groceries back. A pause. A sound that might have been a lighter flicking. You think you are winning. You think you are free. But you don't understand how the world works. I did everything for you. I built this life for you. The money, the connections, the reputation. It was all for the family. I did what I had to do. Someone had to be the strong one. Someone had to make the hard choices. Another pause. You will realize it one day. When your daughter disappoints you, when she leaves you, you will realize that love isn't enough. You need control. And when you realize that, you will remember me. The line clicked dead. I saved the voicemail. I backed it up to the cloud. I sent it to Jonah. I didn't save it to punish her. I saved it to remind myself of what I was not. She truly believed that love was insufficient. She believed that without control, human connection was impossible. It was the saddest thing I had ever heard. 6 weeks after the accident, I was cleared to walk with a cane. I could hold my daughter while standing up. I could walk to the kitchen. I could feel the ground under my feet. I told Jonah I wanted to end it. I asked for a meeting, not in a courtroom, not in a lawyer's office, in the small park halfway between my house and her office, a public place, open air. She agreed. Graham drove me. He wanted to come with me to the bench. But I shook my head. I need to do this alone. I said, wait in the car. Keep the camera running. I walked to the bench. It was a crisp autumn day. The leaves were turning gold and red. Marlene was already there. She looked diminished. Her clothes were still expensive, but they hung loosely on her frame. Her hair was pulled back severely, showing the lines in her face. She wasn't wearing makeup. I sat down on the other end of the bench, placing my cane between us. I placed my phone on the bench between us. Screen up, recording app open. I am recording this. I said, under state law, as long as one party consents, it is admissible. I consent. Marlene looked at the phone, then at me. She didn't protest. She looked tired. What do you want? Stella, she asked. Do you want to gloat? No. I said, I want to give you the terms of your surrender. She laughed. A dry, humorless sound. Surrender? I am your mother. You can't fire me. I can. I said, and I have. I looked out at the playground where children were shouting and running. Here is how it is going to work. I said, Jonah is filing the permanent restraining order tomorrow. You will not contest it. You will agree to a lifetime ban on contact with my daughter. You will resign as the trustee of the Hale Trust and sign over all authority to an independent fiduciary. And if I say no? Marlene challenged. Though her voice lacked its usual fire, then I give the district attorney the full file on the credit card fraud. I said, the identity theft, the forged power of attorney. I have held back the personal fraud charges because I didn't want Grandpa to have to testify in a criminal trial. But if you push me, I will put you in prison. Marlene flinched. She looked at her hands. You would send your own mother to jail? You tried to sell my husband a ticket out of my life. I said, you tried to declare me insane. You tried to steal my child. You stopped being my mother the moment you chose the paperwork over the person. Marlene was silent for a long time. She watched a leaf fall from an oak tree. I just wanted us to be exceptional. She whispered, I wanted you to be strong. I am strong. I said, I am stronger than you ever were, because I don't need to break people to feel powerful. I stood up, gripping my cane. You will sign the papers Jonah sends over. I said, you will pay back every cent you took from Grandpa, and you will never, ever come near my house again. I looked at her one last time. If you see me on the street, you walk the other way. If you see my daughter, you look at the ground. You are a grandmother on paper only, and even that paper is about to be shredded." Marlene looked up at me. Her mask slipped. For a second, I didn't see the monster or the victim. I just saw a lonely, bitter woman who had built a castle out of ice and was now freezing to death inside it. "You will miss me," she said, her voice trembling. "When it gets hard, you will miss me." I looked at her, and I felt a profound, quiet sense of closure. "No, Mom," I said. "I won't. I have already mourned you. The mother I wanted never existed, and the mother I had. I survived her." I turned and walked away. I walked toward the car where Graham was waiting. I saw his face through the windshield, anxious and loving. I saw the car seat in the back where my daughter was sleeping. I didn't look back at the bench. I didn't look back at Marlene. I got into the car. "Did you do it?" Graham asked. "It is done," I said. "Drive." As we pulled away, I watched the park disappear in the rearview mirror. The road ahead was open. I didn't know what the investigation would find. I didn't know how long it would take to fix my credit or heal my hip. I didn't know what consequences would land next. But as I reached back and touched the tiny hand of my sleeping daughter, I knew one thing for sure. The cycle was broken, the chaos had ended, and for the first time in 33 years, the silence in my head wasn't empty. It was free. Thank you so much for listening to My Mother Refused My Newborn. During my car accident, Grandpa's one call changed everything. It has been a journey walking in Stella's shoes as she fought for her family. I would love to hear your thoughts on the ending. Did Stella make the right choice by cutting ties completely? Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story and want more tales of justice, resilience, and family drama, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss a part. Stay safe, stay strong, and remember, sometimes the family you choose is the one that saves you.